I'm not sure what your background knowledge is on this subject matter, but Miss Lynch asked me to make a specific focus on, you're doing sacred texts. This doesn't work at all, does it? No. Why? Why does this happen in this place?
So,
Yes.
can't you change it if you click on the side where that...
It's, the mouse is there, it should work. That was the thing that we needed. So, no, that one's to use these pens. See, the pointer still doesn't work. The one upstairs, we usually just go like that. Anyway, use the mouse. With a bit of luck. That's right, I'll do it over here. What I'm trying to say is that I took this from a lecture I used to give at UQ. So as you know, Miss Lynch, we're going to do 2 sessions on this week with me. And Mrs. Lynch, I think she made you aware of my background. Some of you have taught, you know, I used to do this for a living at UQ. After my PhD, which was on Thai spirit houses, which are little shrines that they do have textual representation within both Buddhism and Hinduism, but it's all very vague at the moment, so I had to come along and make sense of it. After that, I lectured in history of Buddhism, not so much textual analysis, okay? So you guys would be familiar so far the way we study religion, our methodology. Do you use that word a lot in your theory? The methodology, the way, the thought about the methods we use. We can do different things in religious studies. We can do textual exegesis. Have you come across that word yet?
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean? Analysing what we can take from the text, what we can understand from the text. We can do participant observation ethnography, which is what I used to do, get out there and live with some people and hang out with them and work out what these things mean in their life. And there's many other ways we can look at religion too. Basically, Mrs. Lynch has asked me to look at sacred texts, but my background brings me to that, looking at what people actually do, which is perfect because apparently you guys need to start thinking about how do sacred texts manifest in people's lives, or how do believers base what they do on sacred texts. So what I'm going to do today, I don't know how much of the basics you've done, so I'm going to start going over a few of those with those links to those texts, okay? Well, it's a very short session and we only have half an hour left thanks to our technical difficulties. Before I begin, if you would like to know more, or if you would like to get your head around some of the primary sources, as you know I love that word because I'm a history teacher and a historian, 2 really good translations. They both have the same title, Buddhist Scriptures. Oh awesome, it's only that big, I've got the whole, yeah, no. This is translated by a guy called Edward Conze, who was, during the late 1950s and 60s, he was the textual guy for Buddhism. Later, I think this was Lopez, yeah, Donald Lopez, he came along a little bit later. He was born in the 50s, he's a much later scholar. Basically what these 2 guys, these 2 academics have done is they've gone, look, I'm going to translate a selection of texts that I think somebody can use to access the core elements of this religious tradition. In no way is this exhaustive of Buddhist texts, of their sacred texts, because first of all they are very expansive, unlike those in the Christian scriptures, and they are constantly being added to and updated all the time. Okay, so the canon, what does canon mean? C-A-N-O-N, canon, the Pali canon. What's the Christian canon mean? What's a canon in this context in studies of religion? Fraser?
A story that follows on.
Oh, not quite. That could be an apocryphal text, which is a non-official story related to the text, yeah? Anyone? It's the official body of text, a canon. So the Christian canon would be, what's the official body of text? The Bible, totally, which you can pick up and hold in your one hand. The Buddhist canon, and there's 2. They're largely the same. There's the Mahayana, the great vehicle, as you may or may not know. You've done that. I'm just also trying to gauge where you're at. And then there's the Theravadan canon. Okay, it's a little bit more limited. Has less what's called Abhidharma text, which I'll get to in a minute or 5. If you'd like to know more, the Edward Conze one is really good, and I'm going to select really good. It's The Edward Conze one is a little better selected. Okay, I think Conze does a better job of choosing the right text to reproduce. And in this short volume, he's got everything from earliest Pali canon from the Sutta Pitaka, and then he goes right into the Tibetan Book of the Dead and Coming of Maitreya. Hang on, this is the one with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, isn't it? The apocryphal stuff comes into both of them, and they give you a nice slice of Buddha's sacred text across the different traditions, okay? So if you'd like to know more, I'm not going to lend these out. I'll get you a reading out of this one for tomorrow in the hour we can actually do something with. Right, moving right along. 2006 census. I don't have the 2010 one, I'm sorry, gents, because I used to do this lecture and I haven't updated it since. Buddhists in Australia in 2006. 2.1% of the population. I'm pretty sure that's growing. Why would that be growing in Australia? Gus? Immigration. Tyler, have you done that list, or do you remember that from last year? Awesome. Love it. Brisbane. I used to live in Brisbane when I did this. Just how many people are we talking here? How many people are there? Quite a few when you think about it. There are the immigration issues. The stats are rising because of immigration. I think prior to 2006 it was Hinduism that was the largest growing religion in Australia, mainly too because of immigration. But you also do get your converts. You get, as I used to make the joke, the woman with dreadlocks named Samantha who lives up at Kuranda or something, who's teaching people the vicissitudes of Buddhism. Sacred texts of Buddhism, gents, are closely tied to the geography of Buddhism. Okay, as with any religious tradition and as with anything in history really, people being in places really influence how things are interpreted and what their goal is. So one of the things with Buddhism is that because it is so old, because it was an oral tradition for 500 years until things were actually written down, and because that moved from place to place, things were interpreted differently and reflecting the needs of the people at the time. Now, I don't know how much of the historical Buddhism you've done. I actually have no idea where you're at. So basically, Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, the king, the prince of the Muni, of the Shakya tribe, rather, Muni means sage in Pali, of the Shakya tribe in northern India, travelled and lived around this area here. Okay, Sarnath is where he was born. Lumpini is where he achieved enlightenment. Bodh Gaya is where he died. Okay, lived in this area here around the Ganges basin. Okay, in this part of Asia. We have two major schools of thought in Buddhism: Theravadan, which is the orthodox Buddhism, for lack of a better term. Do you know what I mean by orthodox? What's orthodoxy? Have a stab. Quickly look it up, Fraser. What's an Orthodox Christian? Sorry, guys?
General Christian.
Ooh, yeah, kind of.
Kind of like interpreting it literally and like traditionally.
Traditionally, not quite literally. It's flipped. It doesn't really answer questions of whether you're literal or metaphorical interpretations of text, right? So, even though there's Eastern Orthodox Christianity, just so you can get a frame of reference, I would say Catholicism is more orthodox. It's traditional. It has a history going back that's unchanged a long period of time. Okay, Orthodox Christianity is not something you'd see in a neo-evangelical sort of George W. Bush kind of congregation in the United States. Okay, it's more something that's done at Mass. In the Eastern version of Christianity, very similar things occur. I don't know that much about Eastern Christianity. It dates back unbroken. Okay, there is literal interpretation of texts for some, but that's not really a deciding factor. So Theravada Buddhism, here also known as Southern Buddhism, which is popular in Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka. It's limited to those areas. Okay, Theravada literally means way of the elders. Okay, so a traditional form of Buddhism. The Theravadins themselves date back to the original Buddha. They rely on the Pali canon. Pali is an ancient language from northern India at the time the Buddha lived. It's a little bit like Latin in the sense that it's a dead language, it's a religious language. Latin isn't dead in the sense that no one speaks it, but it's not the vernacular for anyone anymore. Okay? Guys like Father Laurie, Brother Joe, they speak Latin, they can teach Latin if they needed to, they can read texts in Latin, but it's not something that somebody cruises around and says, hey man, how's it going in Latin every day on a daily basis. It's the same with Pali. The earliest Buddhist scriptures were written in Pali. P-A-L-I is the way that's spelled. And this stands in distinction from Mahayana Buddhism, or Northern Buddhism, or the Greater Buddhism, okay, which has covers a lot more ground. Now this is a bit misleading because in Tibet, up here and in Nepal, it's actually not Mahayana Buddhism, it's Vajrayana Buddhism. I don't know if you've gone into that, diamond vehicle Buddhism, okay? It's grouped in with Mahayana because it grew out of it. Okay, and there's an important distinction to make between these in terms of their text, because the orthodox form has less text. Okay, they still have the Tripitaka, it's called. Have you heard that phrase yet? Okay, the Tripitaka means the three baskets. Pitaka means basket in Sanskrit, which is the sort of textual language of Mahayana or Northern Buddhism. Okay, the greater vehicle. Yana means vehicle in Sanskrit. Sanskrit and Pali are both Indian languages. Pali is the one that died earlier. I'm not really sure anyone still speaks Sanskrit either. I once had a tutor at uni who said, I'm fluent in Sanskrit. And I thought, is it fluency you can go into a 7-Eleven and communicate? But anyway, but other language families are based on Sanskrit. So Thai is based, the written version of Thai is very much based on Sanskrit. Hindi is based on Sanskrit. Have you ever seen Hindi written, the language of India, the second official language of India? It looks like a line with all these cool squiggles coming down from underneath it. That's very, very close to what Sanskrit looks like, and that was adapted. Thai is different again, but it's a Sanskrit alphabet, a Sanskrit-based script with a spoken language family from southern China, just in here, from the Tai-Kadai language families. My point is that these texts change as you get this geographical movement. So, are you familiar with the birth, renunciation, enlightenment story of the Buddha?
Is that with the lotus?
Before that. Okay. Maybe we'll go into a bit of that then. Basically, Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakya tribe, after his enlightenment, when he became a wandering preacher or a wandering mendicant, Gautama is his name, it's like my name's Michael, his name is Gautama, okay? Lived somewhere around here, okay? You can still go to where he lived, where his palace was, where he lived a life of luxury. From there, after he started preaching, we're going to go into this in a second or five, word kind of spread, Buddhism started to decline though from the 7th century, so about 1200 years it was popular in India, and then it started to decline. And there's actually no real Buddhism left in India. It's not big schools of, big large congregations of Buddhists in India left, okay? It's largely an Asian religion that exists outside India. Now there's still stupas, there's still relics, there's still old temples there that people go on pilgrimages to. Just like we heard Mr. Gregory go on pilgrimage to the Hermitage and all that, people still go back to northern India. The Dalai Lama lives in northern India. He's the Tibetan government in exile, but there is no real indigenous Indian community of Buddhists that this religion represents them, okay, anymore. From here it quickly spread to Sri Lanka, about the 2nd century, north all the way up until the Middle East. You would have seen that, was it ISIS blew up it was the Taliban blew up those Buddhists. Maybe you guys are a bit too young, I think it was in the early 2000s when all that kicked off. That was all the way up in Afghanistan, up in here. There were these giant statues of these beautiful Buddhas that dated back well over 2,000 years, and they stuck them full of dynamite and blew them up because they were an affront to Allah. Peace be upon him. Anyway, there's not a large Buddhist population here, and there's not many texts that have come out of that area either. Okay? It's spread in 2 different ways. From Sri Lanka, as you can see here, missionaries to Burma and into Thailand. Into Burma or Myanmar first, and then through Thailand. then from Myanmar down through Laos and into Cambodia. And this is the large Theravadan area now. Alternatively, it's amazing to me that you've got these countries in such close proximity. And Laos and Vietnam do share quite a lot, as does Cambodia and Vietnam, but Vietnamese Buddhism came down through China much later. Okay? So while Sinhalese or Sri Lankan monks were sending Buddhism to Burma in the 2nd century, and it's arguable whether they got to northern Thailand in the 2nd or as late as the 6th or 7th centuries of the Common Era, Chinese Buddhism was being reinterpreted and then spread down through China to Vietnam. And that way that's how you get Mahayana in Vietnam, and yet just over the border in Cambodia and Laos you've got Theravadan. Okay? One of the things that I think is really interesting for you blokes is, who's been to Japan? Okay, a couple of you. So you've been to a Buddhist temple in Japan? Anyone? Been to a temple? Yeah. You've been to a Zen monastery or temple or anything like that?
One, but I was like 8.
Okay, so I won't ask you if it was Rinzai or Soto Zen. I'll just leave you alone with that. Why I'm going through all this stuff is that the sacred texts that people read that inform their behaviours and inform their being good Buddhists are very much dependent on different sects. So just as in Christianity, and I keep looping back to that just as a frame of reference for understanding, not that there's genuine parallels between them. Do you understand what I mean, guys? So when I say Protestantism and Catholicism, when I say Mahayana and Theravada, they're not the same. You cannot draw those comparisons. Okay? Be that as it may, Mahayanists are like a reformed version of Buddhism, just as Protestants are a reformed version of Christianity. Jay, you awake, buddy? Thanks. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that when you get Zen Buddhists as opposed to a monk in Thailand, they will look at very different texts and they will do very different things. Okay, so as the historical Buddhism got transported across China, okay, and then to Korea, and then from Korea into Japan in the 4th to the 6th centuries of the Common Era, it changed a lot. And this is where we get Zen Buddhism from. The Chinese version of that, Chan Buddhism, came a bit earlier. The Northern Mahayana, Indian, Jhana, Yogacara, and it's been a while since I've given this talk. Yogacara, and I'll think of the other sect at a later point. So the point is that geography, movement, life situations influence text. Okay, yes, he's naked. Yes, I blurred out his junk so we don't have too much to look at. But why is this guy up here? I'm not sure what you've done about the 6th century BC or what you know about the historical context. But again, the kind of texts, the kind of sacred texts that people read still and inform their lives depend on where they were started and what kind of social situations they met as they spread. So, to give you the grounding of the beginnings of Buddhism, even back to the oral tradition, and how the written texts are what they are today, how they have manifested, we need to go back to think about the socio-cultural situation in the 6th century BCE. Okay? So just like, and again, that parallel is going to be made with Christianity. I'm not saying one influenced the other, and especially in terms of this, but just like 1st century Palestine, where the original member of the Christian religion, Jesus, lived. He renounced the world. He rejected the Jewish authority. He preached directly to the people. He gave up all worldly possessions. The Buddha did something very similar in the 6th century BCE. There was large urban development in the time, especially up in the Ganges Basin, accompanied by a large cultural shift. Now, new movements of wandering ascetics. This word ascetics in single inverted commas, do you know what that means? What's an ascetic? I'll answer it once. Fraser's got a definition going for us in a hurry. Okay, an ascetic for our purposes is basically a religious, holy person who renounces the world, renounces comfort, renounces all their nice things they have, gives everything up for the sake of enlightenment. or to preach, or to uncover truth, right? So I'm definitely not an ascetic. I like my creature comforts far too much. Northern India, as we know, is a Hindu place, Hindu country, 26 different states, all with different cultures and traditions, 330 million different gods in Hinduism. The word Hindu is based on the old Persian word for those who live across the Indus, literally the Indus River that flows through Pakistan. People on the other side of what is present-day Iraq and Iran referred to people in southeastern Pakistan and India as Hindus because they are from across the Indus River. An aggregation of all these different religious traditions, some 3,500 years old, became known as Hinduism. It's probably better to refer to it as Vaishnavism, Shaivism, whichever god they worship. The point I'm trying to make is at the time, the Vedas are one of the oldest texts of Hinduism, one of the oldest accepted texts. These texts were hotly debated at the time because of the social change that was going on. So like in your own experiences, things that 150 years ago, such as the church's view on homosexuality, these things are changing before our eyes, aren't they? I'm not sure what the official party line from the Pope is on homosexuality. I'm positive it's still similar to what it has been. However, we are starting to see more people go, hang on a minute. Things are different to the 15th century. Things are different to the 15th century where even if you mention that, you would probably be burned and then have to spend several hundred years in purgatory trying to cleanse yourself for your sins, which your family could get you out of if they gave enough to a local Catholic community, right? We're all aware of this historical. Okay. Again, we had this questioning of authority, this change, this social upheaval. Lots of things are being debated. The accepted wisdom of the Vedas, the rituals, the sacrifices to various gods, was being questioned. There's a time of intellectual development. Wandering ascetics like this bloke, and this bloke's an ascetic because he's got no clothes on, he just cruises around Starkers with a fan, and that's his way. Well, it's India, it's warm, but it's also torrential rain full of insects and stuff, so it is going to be a tough life cruising around like this. But this guy is doing this so he won't have attachment to any worldly things. Okay? This became the norm. The Buddha popped up during this period. The Upanishads started being written. This was a new form of Hindu text. The Upanishads are basically, they focus on meditations, austerities, okay? Doing without for the purpose of enlightenment and a better rebirth. Meditations, austerities, and sacrifice. Okay? Newer, more improved ways to do the family sacrifice, the community sacrifice to the gods of Hinduism, Shiva, Vishnu, and all his different incarnations or avatars. Okay? And along comes the Buddha. The two main heretical movements of the time were Buddhism and Jainism. Now, during this period, the priests or the Brahmin caste, okay, in this, like, I'm trying to make sure I'm not losing your words, so I keep stopping and looking pleadingly that you're understanding me. The Brahmin caste who would interpret the sacred text, the Vedas, and then give that wisdom, that oral sort of tradition to the people, this started becoming questioned by people like the Buddha and the founder of Jainism, Mahavira, however you pronounce it. I'm Australian, so it's Mahavira today. So Mahavira, Jainism is also called Jainism. I prefer to pronounce it Jainism, J-A-I-N, just in my head it says Jain, not Jain. I guess that's the American influence in scholarship. Mahavira and the Buddha were supposedly contemporaries. They may have sat down and had a bit of a heated debate about this stuff. The main point of this is that they rejected all these texts. They rejected the received wisdom of the Vedas. They rejected the priests or the Brahmins' right to disseminate that willy-nilly and interpret it however they wanted. And instead they placed emphasis on a direct experience, okay, of what is really real. Okay? Which in the Buddha's case, you need to achieve that through following a middle path, an avoidance of extremes. Don't go out and buy the best computer you can have. Don't go without a computer because you need to learn. Just be happy with your Dell student computer. See what you've good Buddhist will just be faithful and, oh well, it's not the best, but I don't need the best. See what I mean? So the reason is that the Vedas at the time, or the priests at the time, so the Brahmins at the time, took a lot of liberty with that, just as medieval Christian priests did. And I make those parallels again just for our understanding. I don't mean that one influenced the other at all. I think about it more as human psychology, basically. Okay? So at the time the Buddha rejects what is there. He was a prince. He decides that, no, I'm not going to live in this life of luxury. I'm going to renounce the world. I'm going to go about it on my own. And this is what the texts, sacred texts of Buddhism reflect. Okay, so just to make it a little bit clearer, one of the things we're going to have a squiz at on the immersion this year, Gus, that we looked at last year, is how many people in Thailand become monks. How many Theravadan Buddhist young fellas your age become a monk for a month or something like that. They have to shave off their eyebrows and their heads. You'd never be allowed back to school, would you? And they go and they live at the monastery. Sometimes they do it for 3 or 4 days. Sometimes they do it for a month. It's very rare they do it for longer than a month anymore. Okay, to have that direct experience. And the reason they do that is that the texts model the Buddha's life, and also the Abhidharma, the commentary, the more precise interpretation of what the Buddha taught, the third text. Connor, could you stop telling me what you're doing? Because if you're shaking your mouse real quick, it tells me you're not taking notes on what I'm saying. Probably a game of some sort, but call me crazy. I played a lot of computer games, fellas. I can always tell when it's students, you know.
Maybe they're just still leading spare meetings.
I'm sure they're that intent on it. What was I saying again? The renouncement of the world is the key component of the Buddhist text of the early Sutta Pitaka. Suttas mean saying. The sayings attributed to the Buddha while he was alive. So basically what I'm trying to say was our fella here with his blurry bit over his junk, so I didn't offend anyone, basically he's trying to emulate the life of the Buddha through an interpretation of the Sutta Pitaka, which is what the sayings of the Buddha were. Okay? The texts, the early ones, and I'm going to talk about Theravadan Buddhism, Buddhist texts in Pali, written in Pali, they come in what's called the 3 baskets. Okay? And literally, does anybody know why they call it 3 baskets? Think historical, geographical. Gus?
There's like one, I remember, I can't remember.
Yeah, we did something about.
Okay, literally back then, this is before books, okay, so movable type printing was invented in Europe in the early 16th century. Back then, these stories, these scrolls, these parchments in India had to be stored in baskets. And as they grew, they had to start thinking, how do we organise these baskets? Like your teachers are always telling you, organise your files and your folders according to subjects. And then the year 8 kids are like, no, I know Simon. It's like, which is it? The sayings of the Buddha? Is it the utterances? Are you a living Buddha? And did you utter this brilliant thing? Is it a story of the monk's code? What should you do if you're going to be a professional scholar? Or is it a commentary on that? Well, I don't understand, sir. It means that they started getting divided up according to what they meant. Yes?
Can people become Buddhists today?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends what tradition you're in. In Zen Buddhism, enlightenment is achievable by everyone. And enlightenment is not something to happen after you die. The cessation of suffering, which you're familiar with the 4 holy truths of Buddhism already?
4 noble truths.
4 noble truths?
Yeah.
Yep, and then
Eightfold path.
the Eightfold Path, right, that is the good. Okay, so the cessation of suffering, or Nibbana in Pali, Nirvana in Sanskrit, is the 3rd of those truths. In the Theravadan tradition, no. You're only hoping for a better rebirth, really, at this stage. It's far bigger than anyone can understand. Most people who live in Burma, Thailand, Laos and Cambodia are just hoping for a better rebirth, or maybe a rebirth as a god in some heavenly realm. In Zen Buddhism, for example, in Soto Zen Buddhism, Nirvana is something that's achieved while you're still alive. And it's not, the cessation of suffering is not that you will die and you will not be born again, which is taken as a literal thing in Theravada Buddhism. It's a moment where you just, all rational thought stops, you see things for what they really are, and it's timeless because it all breaks down, if that makes sense. Yes?
You were just saying that people in those places hope to be reborn as gods.
Yeah.
I thought Buddhism didn't have any gods.
This is interesting. My good friend Dr. Adam Bowles, who teaches this at UQ still, and I used to have this funny argument all the time, the atheist religion. Buddhism assumed all the gods of Hinduism. So like Christianity adopted some pagan festivals because of the culture at the time. So Easter predates Christianity. Halloween's not a Christian holiday, but All Souls, Halloween, these predate Christianity. Buddhism took a lot. Okay, it took a lot more than Christianity took from its pagan antecedents. Buddhism took all the gods of Hinduism, and then it understands the universe to be divided up into many different levels and heavens and stuff. It doesn't deny the existence of those gods, but the Buddha, the founder of the religion, is not a god himself. He is an ideal. He was a bloke. He was a man who renounced the world, achieved enlightenment, and passed into Nibbana. Nibbana is the Pali. I'm not trying to stuff it up and be funny. Passed away into Nibbana, which means he would be born, he would suffer no more. The idea of there being no gods is the earliest Pali suttas, the sayings of the Buddha. They focus on this idea of don't worry about rebirth, don't worry about what's going to happen to you after you die. Try and achieve enlightenment. So, in answer to your question, there's no Godhead, there's no one God that we will worship, but there are many gods, there are many different levels of heaven. And it's like the Thai spirit houses that I studied, they're a demigod in one of them anyway, and he's a Vedic god. His story is there's a whole interaction with him and Shiva, and then there's an interaction with him and the Buddha, and it all gets a bit intertwined. They do exist, but they're not like in Christianity where God is everything, all one. Probably can't really understand him that well, so we have Jesus to approach. You know what I mean? Yes?
You said that Buddha achieved enlightenment and then died.
Yeah.
Does that mean he follows the Zen one?
No. Okay, so Zen Buddhism is a very late adaptation in Japan of the Chinese Chan Buddhism, which wasn't developed until the 2nd century of the Common Era. So this is 800 years after the Buddha's death. Okay, the Buddha's enlightenment happened in the 6th century BC in northern India. And the moment of enlightenment when he touched the ground, and there's statues of him everywhere. I'll bring some photos for you guys. The moment of enlightenment was when he would be born no more. There would be no more suffering for him. There's no more karmic influence on his rebirth. Okay, now that's quite loaded in and of itself. And this is something that you guys need to think about with Buddhist texts, is that nowhere in any of the Pali, Brody's going to fall asleep on me in a second, and nowhere in the Pali or Sanskrit canons do they have this "you will be reborn again" as it's not you. It's the best way I've ever heard it summed up. Just think of a candle, right? This is your life now. Think of a candle. Think of a candle that's not lit. Go like that, light that one, snuff that one out. What transfers? What's fire? Like, fire's just a byproduct of something else. Salt? Soul? Yeah, but there's no, the flame, it's a different flame. The flame is a byproduct of a different thing burning. But, you know what I mean?
It's the same
It's just, it doesn't, there's nothing, no actual thing moves. There's no transmigration of souls. Or, what's it? And Atman, there's no, Atman is the word for soul or self in Pali and Sanskrit. There's no transfer of that as such. There's more of a causal relationship. Okay, so the Buddha died, achieved enlightenment, and because that caused no more births. Okay, and I was going to go into his previous lives today, but we don't have time because Buddhists often use that. We might skip through this one. You've done that. Basically, guys, what you've done the 4 holy truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Sometimes they're intertwined. They're called the Noble Truths and the Holy Eightfold Path, or the Eightfold Way, or something like that. Basically, a lot of what these scriptures and texts point to is this arising of suffering. Suffering, dukkha in Pali. Is that Sanskrit? I can't remember if that's Sanskrit or Pali. Yeah, dukkha. in one of those two languages means suffering, and suffering arises through tanha, or thirst. That's Pali, okay? Basically, what a lot of these early texts, and the ones that I'm going to share with you very soon as I scan it and have a bit of a look at it, try and look at ways that Buddhists use this in their life, is to avoid this thirst, this craving of suffering, okay? Now that's really tough because we're human, right? And even monks, these world-renouncing monks often get caught out in conspiracy. Have you seen the news recently that the Tiger Temple in Thailand was shut down because monks were selling tiger cubs and killing them and freezing them and selling them for their fur in China because they can get really good money for it? These dudes were still rocking around with their shaved heads and eyebrows and their robes on, not owning anything, but their temple was super nice, wasn't it? See what I mean? They still had this craving for power, for superiority amongst their own social circles. And they were still doing naughty things to get that because tanha had not been extinguished. They weren't avoiding the extremes. And that's a central sort of theme through a lot of these early texts. Okay? Is the avoidance of passionate clinging, welcoming this and that, life, craving for sensual pleasures. Who likes lamingtons?
Yeah.
Why do you like them? What's good about it?
It tastes nice.
Yeah, exactly. See? Sensory stimulation, sensory attachment. Who's ever had a foot massage? Yep. How awesome is a foot massage? Alright. It's pretty good? We're going to get one in Thailand, guys. Wanting a foot massage. I want a foot massage right now because my foot's kind of swollen. So I did some work on the weekend that involved me standing for long periods. I am craving a foot massage. If I was a good Buddhist and I followed the example well, especially, actually I'm going to give you the one. Yeah, I'll give you the one about the king who cuts his head off and then realises all kinds of cool stuff. I would not be craving anything. I wouldn't care if the foot just fell off. Okay? So, we're going to have to finish up because the bell goes in 2 minutes. I would like you to do something for me for homework. I would like you to just do one simple task. I would like you to try and find out, do a search, any search, just bring some ideas. How do Buddhist scriptures relate to this concept of tanha, thirst? Okay, I'll write it up on the board. Write it in your diary. Just search. Just come with some ideas tomorrow. I don't want you to spend 3 hours on this and write a doctoral thesis, year 11. Just, I want you to come tomorrow thinking, all right, what have I found? Just an idea. How do Buddhist scriptures guide one to stop tanha? Oops, I put the accent in the wrong place. The little dot under the N means it's like the sound is at the back of your mouth. Not out. Out. Our tongue's behind our teeth, it's like pushed into the roof of your mouth. Can you guys do that very quickly for me tonight? It's only going to take you 10 minutes or so. Just a simple answer. It's not some grand paragraph or anything. We're just going to discuss that tomorrow. I'm going to give you a reading tomorrow that'll help you. And then I need to really focus on this angle and how these scriptures inform people's actions. I wanted to go through the historical development of them all, but I forgot we're not doing a 13-week semester course on Buddhism at uni. It's just 2 lessons. So we'll stick to this angle, okay? Are there any further questions, gentlemen? Can I answer anything? How can it keep you awake, Connor?
Food.
You're craving sleep, you're thirsting. Gents, thank you for your attention today. If you have any questions about this, write them down tonight and just bring them to me tomorrow. I'm happy to answer them. You alright, mate? You sure?
Yeah.
Alright. Good day, gentlemen. See you later, guys.
Sounding like 2 minutes.
Fraser, don't give it to me. No, you gotta go see UK, buddy. Go see Mr. McDonough. He's right next door. Go see him. He'll send you the sister. You're not gonna throw up or anything, are you?